Hi, I'm Clare Chalkley and I'm a member of the board of the UK ACEDS chapter. Welcome to our vlog series on mental health and wellbeing. For this episode, I'm delighted to be joined by Richard Martin, Director of Mental Health and Wellbeing at Byrne Dean. And today we're going to talk about the Mindful Business Charter. Richard, it's fantastic to have you with us today. You're probably best placed to do this, so would you like to introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about your role?
Thanks, Claire, and thanks obviously for having me in this podcast. So yeah, I'm Richard Martin. I'm a dad. I've got three kind of grown-up kids. I have a background as a lawyer, so I spent 20 years as a lawyer in Jones Day, and then more recently in Speech Bertram. I was an employment lawyer, and then in 2011, at a point of time in my life in which everything seemed to be going very well, had a lovely young family and a beautiful wife and a beautiful house and a lovely this and a lovely that, and I was involved in all sorts of things in my community and had a great job, had a big team, and was on the management committee of my firm, and all sorts of things going well. And then suddenly I had a big breakdown. So I had the early signs were a panic attack, and then I quickly degenerated into a bit of a state and spent a lot of time in hospital and then a lot of time recovering. So my role now, having kind of come through all of that, is working with organisations in lots of different ways around kind of promoting awareness of mental health in the workplace. And so I work for Byrne Dean. We are a consultancy mostly made up of employment lawyers who got tired of dealing with the problems that employment lawyers have to deal with, the bullying, harassment, discrimination type stuff that comes out of dysfunctional workplaces. And we work to help organisations create cultures in which that kind of stuff doesn't happen, in which people can thrive. Kind of fairer, more productive workplaces is our kind of mantra. And I guess just by way of context in terms of the Mindful Business Charter, when the Mindful Business Charter was first launched in 2018, we were asked whether we'd like to help promote and develop it. And we said, oh, yes, that fits absolutely with our purpose. We'd love to be involved. And so that's been a big part of my role over the last 3 years.
Oh, fantastic. So tell us a bit more about the Mindful Business Charter, MBC, bit more about what it does and what it sets out to achieve.
Sure. So I'll tell you a little story, first of all, which might resonate and put some context around it. So as I say, I spent some time in hospital. When I was in hospital, I remember very vividly one therapy session, which was a group session, in which the therapist said, look, I'd like you all to just stand up in the middle of the room to begin with. And I'd like you to, with your left hand, touch the left shoulder of somebody that you feel quite connected with today. So we all did that. And then she said, with your right hand, touch the right shoulder of somebody that you feel you can help today. So we all did that. And she said, keep your hands there, but with your right foot, can you touch the right foot of somebody that you feel can help you today? So we all did that. And at this point, like any good lawyer, I was kind of balancing on my tiptoes, kind of falling over, feeling very strained and uncomfortable. And she said, hold your position. And she slowly kind of walked around the group. And she came to me and she said, Richard, are you comfortable there? And I said, no. And she said, do you often feel like this? And I said, yeah. I'm a partner in a law firm. This is my life. She said, can you just look at everybody else? And everyone else was standing quite comfortably, feet firmly on the ground, doing what she'd asked, but in a quite comfortable position. She said, can you just ask somebody to move? Just ask that person there, move them, get them to move a little way this way, and you'll be more comfortable, won't you? And I thought, oh, I didn't know that we could ask people to move. And that's sort of, in one sense, that's what the Charter is about. So the Charter says this, that when we're stressed, our brains don't work very well. And that's not good for us as individuals. It's not a nice place to be. It's not a healthy place to be. Stress causes all sorts of problems, both physical and mental. But also, it impacts the quality of the work that we do.
Yeah.
And so that's not good for the organisations we work for, or our clients and other people that we're interacting with. And most of us are well-intentioned, most of us are kind, we don't mean to cause each other stress, but we do, and then we don't talk about it. And what the Charter says is, could we all be a little bit more aware of the impact of what we're doing and the impact that we're having upon each other? And could we give each other the permission to talk about it? Because if we could do those things, which seem quite simple, if we could do those things, then we could perhaps be able to identify some of the unnecessary causes of stress that exist in the ways in which we work and remove them and create healthier and more effective ways of working. And at the heart of the Charter is the idea that there's a lot that we can do within our organisations, and that's important. But very often it's the external relationships, and in the law firm context, the relationship with clients and so on, which are often the causes of stress. And the charter began with conversations between the legal team at Barclays and a couple of their panel law firms, Adlershaw, Goddard and Pinsent Masons. And Barclays saying, look, we know that we are a big, powerful, important client. And we know that, when we ring up, you all start jumping. And that's not necessarily what we want. And it's not necessarily good for you, and it's not necessarily good for the quality of the work that we do. And we don't want that to be the way in which we work. So can we all try and talk to each other about finding a way of changing that dynamic and creating a different way of being that allows us to express what we need, and allows us to create an environment and a culture in which we can do the really important, difficult, complex, highly pressured and so on work that we all need to do, but in a way that is healthy and is sustainable.
And I guess it's in the client's best interest to have a healthy and happy legal team supporting them on their complex and high profile and high risk matters as well. Yeah. So is that how the Mindful Business Charter came about? Was it from clients approaching yourselves and people like yourselves saying, how do we do better?
So those initial conversations between the folk at Barclays and Adlershaws and Pinsents, they, I suppose like all good lawyers would, said, okay, well, if we're going to do something about this, and they were being quite brave at the time, they said, if we're going to do something about this, do we need a big rule book? And quickly they
playbook.
So no, that's not what we're going to do. We're going to create a permissive framework rather than a kind of prescriptive rule book. We're going to create a permissive framework that looks to create the opportunity for people to have these conversations and to be more thoughtful, more mindful about what they're doing. And so they focused upon 4 pillars. And the first pillar is all about openness and respect, and it says, first of all, I care about my fellow professionals. I care about how they are, I care about the impact I'm having upon them and so on. And I want to create a way of being with them that allows us to have these conversations, allows us to ask each other to move, in the context of my example earlier on. And that's kind of the starting point, and that underpins everything else, and says, look, let's put this on the agenda for the way in which we're working. When we start working on something, let's talk about how we're going to work and the impact it's going to have on each other and so on and so forth. Let's say what we need. If you need to do yoga at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning, let's make sure that you've got time to do yoga at 9 o'clock on a Monday morning. Whatever your kind of non-negotiables are, what's important for you. Let's allow people to be brave about, these are the days I work and these are the days I don't work. So don't expect me to be responding on a Thursday afternoon because that's when I'm not working, for example. And also within this, recognizing that we all have to do hard work. And sometimes that will involve working in the evenings and at weekends and on holiday even perhaps sometimes. But let's try and do that in a mindful way and deliberate way rather than it just being kind of, I'm available whenever you need me sort of thing. Yeah. So the first pillar is about openness and respect. The second one gets into kind of more granular detail about the ways in which we communicate. So meetings and emails and some basic stuff, but just challenging us to think. So first of all, let's only have meetings that we need to have. Let's make them as short as possible. Let's have a clear agenda and let's stick to that agenda. Let's allow people to join meetings in the way that best suits them. Let's only make them join a meeting for the bit of the meeting that's relevant for them. Let's think about the time of day. Let's not have meetings at lunchtime or after hours. Let's be mindful of time zones. If we work in a global organisation, if I arrange a meeting at 3 o'clock in the afternoon in London, what about my colleagues in Hong Kong and my colleagues in Los Angeles? And if we have to arrange a meeting like that, well, let's not cancel it at the last moment because it doesn't suit me anymore actually, or I've something else has come up and whatever. Because my colleagues in Hong Kong, they've spent the evening waiting for this. And with emails, we know that we're all inundated with a huge volume of emails. Let's try and reduce that. Let's only send emails that we need to send. And let's only copy in people that need to be copied in. And let's make sure that our emails make sense. And let's make sure that the subject line matches the content. And let's think about the time of day we're sending emails and so on and so forth. Because, whilst it might suit me sending emails on a Thursday evening because that's my time to catch up or whatever it might be, what's the impact upon people who are receiving them? Let's allow people to have time out. And yes, perhaps things like I don't know, if you need to get hold of me in the evening, don't just email me, because I'm not going to sit there with my family dinner or in front of the TV or whatever with my phone waiting just to see if you've sent me an email. If you need me, send me an email, but send me a message or phone me and say, I need you to look at something, because I don't want to be sitting there every evening, always on call. Yeah. So that's the second pillar, meetings and emails. The third pillar talks about respecting rest periods, and it's kind of what it says on the tin. We know, don't we, that we all need a bit of a break sometime. But actually the ways in which we seem to work, and I guess to an extent COVID and lockdown has exacerbated this, but we've kind of developed into this way of being that says we're always available, and that's not right.
Especially when we've been working in our homes as well, and that's about having the barriers between work. You don't have the break point between leaving work and getting into your house, and not only are you working at home, you're living at home, and it's very easy to always have that laptop lid open.
Yeah, absolutely. And it's not about creating hard and fast rules, and it's not about saying, you know, don't work hard and don't work long hours if you need to, or whatever, but do so thoughtfully, do so deliberately, mindfully, and trying to mitigate it as much as possible. And the final pillar is just about the final pillar is about mindful delegation. So how does this look internally, and trying to make sure that the way in which we work with our internal colleagues is as thoughtful and mindful as we'd like to be treated ourselves, and how we're treating other people externally as well. So that's kind of where it came from, and it was launched in October 2018 with 3 banks, RBS, Lloyds and Barclays, and 9 law firms. And then over the years since then, we've effectively doubled every year. So we're now at just under 100 organisations involved, and they're all at different points. They're all doing different things with it. And the whole idea of the Charter is that it is that permissive framework. It provides the language and the challenge, I guess, to think and to be brave and to push back. And every organisation will therefore be doing things at a different pace and a different way, depending upon where they are and their culture and so on.
And at the minute, is the Mindful Business Charter focused on the legal industry with lawyers and clients? And
good question. So it began very differently with banks and law firms. But very quickly the recognition was actually this is not something that is just unique to those 2 professions. And so we've been growing in terms of sectors involved and also in terms of geography. So it's becoming increasingly cross-business, but also global. But there's still very much there are a lot of law firms involved, and there are a lot of financial institutions involved, but there are others. And I think the more organisations and the more different organisations that can come on board, the more impact we can have. Because if you are my client, so say I'm a law firm and you are a baker, to take an old example. But anyway, the fact that I know you're involved, the fact that I know you've made the commitment to the Charter means that I can push back. And when you say, can you turn this around for Monday morning, I can push back and say, well, hang on, if you need me to do that, of course I will. But that will mean me and my team working at the weekend. So do you need that? If not, can we do it on Tuesday or whatever it might be? And because I know that you've made the commitment, I can be brave in a way that perhaps lots of professionals, but I think possibly legal professionals more than others, don't feel able to. Giving that permission.
There's a word that you've used time and time again in this conversation so far, and I just keep picking up on it, and that is the word brave. You know, to make a change is brave. To speak out is brave. And I guess it just kind of reinforces how, and the legal industry is a very traditional industry anyway, and things don't happen very, very quickly. But I guess it shows how kind of entrenched behaviours are, how entrenched reactions are, that, you know, we have to use the word brave to try and make a change.
Yeah, and lots of us kind of grew up in organisations where we were told, yeah, I know it's hard, and I know it's difficult, and I know it's not ideal, and so on and so forth, but this is just the way it is. So you've just got to suck it up and get on with it. And if you're not strong enough, well, you know, there's the door. It was good enough for me, it was good enough for you. And we know that that's not good enough. And we know the status quo. It's not even a status quo. It's been getting worse steadily, you know, over the years. It's, you know, things are much more highly pressured and much more demanding now than when I was training, for example. And there's a lovely quote from Barack Obama. So whenever you're trying to kind of think of something wise to say, somebody else has thought about it beforehand, said something more wise than you'll ever do. He said change doesn't happen whilst we sit around waiting for the right person or the right time. We are the people that we've been waiting for. We are the change.
Yeah. And
gosh, I'm getting emotional. Don't know why, but there is that sense of we have the opportunity. We can just choose to be part of the status quo, or we can choose to try to do things differently, and we know that we should.
Yeah, and it is having that first conversation. It is having that first uncomfortable conversation and taking yourself out of a comfort zone, and I guess making yourself vulnerable to some extent as well, to be able to put your hand up and say, you know, this needs to change, or I need help, or, you know, all the things that coming from in a law firm environment, it's not often easy to do. And you think about the way the law firm model works. We have trainees, and the trainees come in and they have, their first seat, their second seat, their third seat, their fourth seat. They go through contentious and all the other business areas as well, and they're looking at the partners, they're looking at the senior associates, they're looking at, well, how do you behave, what's the culture of this firm? So from the minute they walk in the door, they're looking and learning and absorbing not just the technicalities of being a lawyer, but how you act, how you are with clients, how you react with the guys that work in the post room, and how you react with general counsel of most important client. You're learning and absorbing all the time because your success in that firm depends on it. So maybe this is something that needs to be a more maybe pastoral part of the whole training program of being a baby lawyer to becoming an associate and a senior associate, that it's there from the start.
I think that's a really good observation. I think I'd say a couple of things. So first of all, there is a piece in that says part of legal training needs to be enabling, encouraging people to think about what they need themselves in order to be the best lawyer that they can be, or the best whatever it is that they can be, and feeling able to actually ask for that and to create that environment. And I'm reminded of I did a training session with folk from two signatories, so senior lawyers at Barclays and senior folk from one of their law firms, and I was taken by how close the relationship was between these two groups of people. And being what I'm like, I couldn't let it drop. So I said, look, sorry, can we just talk about it? I've been a lawyer for 20 years. I've never experienced a relationship like I'm seeing in this room. Tell me about that. Has it always been that way, or what's going on? And they said, no, this is new. That because we're involved with the charter, and because we've started having conversations with each other about who we are as human beings and what we do outside of work, and what our needs are as a result, we've started seeing each other as human beings, and we've started having conversations in that way, and that has completely changed the dynamic of the way in which we work. And that's, as you say, that's an example that can be set from the highest levels. And in law firms, we need to obviously be aware of just how hierarchical law firms are. People don't, go to the toilet without permission in a law firm. And so those senior leaders really do need to take the lead, because, as you say, we will all look at them and say, well, that's what I need to do to succeed here. And that works two ways, because either when you see that and you look at your senior leaders behaving in a particular way, you either kind of follow their lead and just adapt their ways of working, or you say, well, I don't want that. That's not how I want my life to be, and I'm checking out. And the legal profession loses huge numbers of really valuable and capable people as a result, I think. Yeah,
exactly. So the pillars you talked about, are they? I've seen the Mindful Business Charter Toolkit. Is that essentially the toolkit, or is the toolkit something aside from that?
So the toolkit is something aside from that. It was developed as a way of helping people think about, okay, so how do we get going with the charter? It's all very great, the ideas and so on and so forth. We can see it makes sense, but what do we actually do? And so it's kind of helping people think about early stages of kind of socializing the ideas around the charter internally, and then thinking about conversations and introducing it to organisations that you're working with. And I guess it's the summation, if you like, of the shared learning and experiences of some of the early signatories. And that sense of shared learning is kind of central to the charter. So I kind of think about the charter now as being a community of business organisations who are trying together to change some of the dynamics of the ways in which we work, and learning from each other and sharing best practices, sharing successes, but also sharing the challenges and asking each other, look, I've got a problem here, I don't know what to do with this. And then somebody else will come and say, oh, well, I know we had that, and this is how we solved it. And and here's the documents that we used actually, and here's the PowerPoint, here's whatever. And so that sense of shared learning is, as I say, central to the charter. And it's that the toolkit, I guess, was the sort of starting point of that. And now we're on the website, we have the sort of public side of the website, but there's also a big members area where we're increasingly putting in resources there from organisations so that we don't have to keep reinventing the wheel and we can learn from each other.
And is there a kind of a live element to the website where member organisations can talk, discuss, exchange ideas, or are there meetings? Is there anything outside of the actual website and the fact that you signed up to it? Is there anything that goes on around in the business arena where people can talk and exchange experiences and how it's going and all that kind of stuff?
So yes, we have a sort of number of different ways. The website yet isn't interactive in that way, but we try and make up for that in other ways. So we have every couple of months there's calls where we get people, all of the organisations involved on a call, and we'll ask a handful of signatories each time to give an update on what they've been up to, their successes, but also their challenges and so on and so forth. And that often then follows through into lots of sharing of resources. We encourage organisations to talk to each other all the time, and some ways in which, so some organisations, for example, the way in which they've started with the Charter is to say, well, look, you know, we're new, but we work quite closely with that organisation and they're a signatory. So let's sort of highlight what we're going to do with that organisation, and that will help us kind of embed some ideas. Or there's a law firm that's quite like us, so maybe we could piggyback with them and use them as a bit of a what's the right word, a buddy to kind of help us think about stuff. And then we make sure that we capture all of the ideas that people are coming up with and make sure they're available to people. We ask people to, we'll hold regular events around particular subject matter areas. So we've had events, for example, about what do we need to think about in terms of a mindful return to office spaces and so on and so forth. We've run sessions around our relationship with tech and things like that. We also ask organisations on a roughly annual basis, we're not too prescriptive about it, but we encourage organisations around the anniversary of their joining to just take a moment to reflect and to think, okay, first of all, do we remain committed to this? Secondly, what have we been up to? So just reflecting on that and sharing that with everybody else. But then also, what do I need to go further? What am I lacking? What support could I get? What I want from the community, and then how can we best provide that support?
Yeah, I was just thinking it'd be quite a nice thing to see, maybe as part of the RFP process or as part of the beauty parade process, that NBC can be one of those questions in the same way you have. What's your diversity policy? What's your anti-slavery statement and things like that? That they have something about the NBC as well. That would be something, because then like-minded, you can have that conversation very openly at very early stages, and that would be a great thing to see too.
Well, so some of the initial law firms that signed up, they kind of some of them signed up partly because Barclays said this is how we're going to work. It was a requirement. Lloyds do now have it as a question on their proposal process to say for law firms, are you signed up to the Charter, and effectively, if not, why not? And we know, and this is I guess what's at the part of what is unique about the Charter is we know that the client has an awful lot of influence here, and so much progress that's been made in law firms in other areas, for example in diversity and so on and so forth, has come about because of client pressure. Let's use that. And clients have extraordinary influence in that way and can really make a difference. So
that's fantastic. And the same with technology as well in law firms, that advanced and moved on and developed because clients were expecting things to be done in different ways using technology. So that's brilliant. That's great to see. So
I remember when I was very junior lawyer, the Law Society did a study into this thing called email to decide whether or not this was something that law firms needed to worry about. And the conclusion was no. It's not something that's going to take on in law firms.
Can you imagine if it never had?
I know.
Our lives would have been very, very different. Yeah. So if organisations who haven't already signed up, if they're interested in signing the Charter and adopting all of the things that we've talked about here, how do they go about doing that?
So starting point would be to get in touch with me or one of my colleagues. You can do that. So richard.martin@byrnedean.com or the website for the Mindful Business Charter, mindfulbusinesscharter.com, and there's links there. And what we have a very gentle kind of engagement process. So we'll do a briefing call with people to give more information about what the Charter is and what being involved involves and what we ask of members. There's no kind of checklist. You don't need to have done 103 things before you come on board. What we're much more interested in is what you can do once you have the support of the community and the Charter. So there's a briefing call. We then ask organisations to go away and think about this and think about whether they've got internal support and senior level support for it, because again, we're not asking people to sign off on a big checklist of things they've done. What this requires is the organisation at a senior level to commit to it. And once we've got that, come on board and we'll involve you. We do then have it's going to be every year now. It used to be every 6 months, it's going to be every year. We do now have a big event where we formally welcome new members. And that's an important thing, because it is that public from the joining organisation. It's that public kind of commitment to the other members to say, yeah, we're on board and we mean it. But also the commitment from the community of existing members to say, you know, we welcome you and we'll support you, and so on and so forth.
That's fantastic. And once an organisation's actually signed up and they're up and running, is there any way that they would be monitored, or they can monitor themselves or assess their progress, see if they're kind of meeting their milestones, see if they're meeting their obligations? Is there anything tangible that they could be doing or should be doing?
So it's a good question, and the Charter's been going for 3 years, so we're still quite in our infancy. What we ask of members is, generally speaking, fourfold. We say, first of all, do stuff, so implement stuff. Secondly, share it with the community. Thirdly, spread the word, get other people involved. And there is a membership fee, which is, we try to keep it as low as possible. It's based on organisation size and so on. In terms of kind of that holding people to account, we've tried to be as gentle as possible in that regard. We certainly don't want organisations signing up to the Charter, putting it on their website and doing nothing.
Yeah.
But on the other hand, we want to be more of a carrot rather than a stick. And so, for example, asking signatories to provide updates on our bi-monthly signatory calls, it has many different kind of layers to it, and part of it is a little bit of, well, you've been a signatory now for 18 months. Tell us what you've been up to, because it would be lovely for us all to hear. But it also does just force that organisation to think a little bit. The annual evaluation form, which I mentioned earlier on, is a part of that too. I'm sure that as things develop, some of that will become more sophisticated, and also things like impact assessment will become more sophisticated. At the moment, we don't, across the Charter, across the community as a whole, have any way of formally assessing impact. There's anecdotal stuff, but different organisations have done different things. So some organisations have introduced sort of pulse surveys to assess how people are feeling about the Charter and so on, and its impact, and some organisations will have embedded it into engagement surveys and other things. So we don't have that formal across the community impact assessment, but again, it's something that I think will develop over time.
Well, it's like you said earlier about change. It starts with one person, it starts with today or this minute or this hour, and it has to kind of grow organically. We're talking about a change in mindset. We're talking about a change in culture. So I guess it's a very difficult thing to measure, and it's not something that's going to happen overnight. But I guess from an employee's point of view, knowing that your organisation has signed up to it, that gives you a level of comfort and a level of confidence that if you did need to have a conversation with someone, that the guys in top, your superiors are aware that this is an issue and that they're trying to do something about it.
And I would say, I'm conscious that your ACEDS membership there'll be some people from organisations who are not yet involved, and if this is resonating with you, then talk to people internally and raise the issue. But there'll be some who might be signatories and you're thinking, what are we doing in that regard? And if that's the case, then ask that question. Push back, because this is it's all organisations are different, and all organisations move at different speeds and so on and so forth. But it requires support and input from all different levels. And the more people who are talking about this and engage with it and sort of challenging and having these conversations, the more we create the environment in which it's possible to make change.
Exactly. And I think, rounding things off with the sort of the past 2 years that we've been through with the pandemic and the changing in work practices and people's health, and some of the awful things that people have been through, how do you think mental health awareness has changed within organisations? We talk about it personally ourselves, amongst ourselves regularly, but do you think awareness has changed?
Yes, I think a couple of years ago, so one of the other things I'm involved with is a Lord Mayor of London appeal initiative called This Is Me, which is about using storytelling to break down the stigma around mental illness. And I remember chairing an event at Mansion House probably 3 years ago now. And there were lots of the kind of the great and the good of the city there, and and as part of the event, we had a partner from, I think it's PwC, who was telling his personal story about mental health problems. And I remember sitting there in this kind of wonderful environment with all these great and the good of the city there, thinking, oh my goodness, this is extraordinary. And that if this guy who was, I don't know, I'd probably say mid-30s, so kind of started quite early on in his kind of partnership career, 5 years ago, if this guy had stood up in that environment and told his story, you know, there'd have been an embarrassed silence, people would have been looking at their feet, and HR would have come and taken him away. But what was actually happening was that he was inspiring people, and the conversation has changed enormously, and it's I think one of the things about COVID is it has put it right up there on the agenda. I think one of the challenges that we still have to address, and it's part of what the Charter is about, I think, but lots of organisations have done lots of great awareness raising and storytelling and put in lots of resources to support people when they're struggling. I think there is still a really big piece which says we need to think about the culture, the environment, the systems in which we're requiring people to operate, because we know that despite all of the investment we're making, the levels of distress that are present in our organisations as well as our broader community continue to grow. So there's something fundamental there that we need to address.
Yeah. And I think what the Charter sets out to do is incredible. You know, the fact that you've put the time and effort and energy into this, you've identified the need for it, and you've delivered it, and it's there now and people are using it. I think it's very, very long overdue. And that's me speaking personally from, you know, as somebody who could have done with this a few years ago. I often think we're told how to take care of our physical health. We're told to eat our 5 a day and to exercise and to drink moderately and to not smoke cigarettes. We're not really taught about how to take care of our mental health. So often when we do struggle, it's hard to see the signs ourselves. And, you know, we might not know the difference between a bad day and a bad week, or the start of something a lot more nasty, so to speak. So it's been fantastic talking to you. I really, really appreciate your time. I do think what you're doing is incredible. So thank you so much.
Well, you're welcome, and thank you very much it's been lovely talking to you, and thank you for the opportunity to kind of spread the word a bit. So
you're very, very welcome, and we'll put all the details about Mindful Business Charter along with the podcast on our ACEDS site. So thank you so much, Richard. It's been great talking to you.